All right, welcome to chapter 5 of the book of First Nephi and the Book of Mormon. We're continuing this story of Nephi and his brothers getting the brass plates and coming back to where Lehi and his wife Sariah are set. So now verse 1, and it came to pass that after we had come down into the wilderness unto our father, behold, he was filled with joy, and also my mother, Sariah, was exceedingly glad, for she truly had mourned because of us. So there's a bit of a glimpse. She's like, they've been gone like a month because it took like 10 some odd days to get there. Then they had a couple of days of trying to figure out what to do, and they had the 2 failed attempts. And then they had to, they murmured and argued and griped and complained, and the angel saw him, and then Nephi went in that night and got his stuff done, and the faith crisis and all that stuff from the last chapter. And then they spent another 10 some odd days coming back. So in her mind, her expectation is it's taken too long. They should have been back by now, meaning they're not meeting my expectation, therefore it's time for me to worry about this. Verse 2, for she had supposed that we had perished in the wilderness, and she also had complained against my father, telling him that he was a visionary man, saying, behold, thou hast led us forth from the land of our inheritance, and my sons are no more, and we perish in the wilderness. And after this manner of language had my mother complained against my father. Do you see the logic in her mind? My family, my babies are gone, and it's your fault. There's a logic that she is going through in her mind of understanding and justifying where she's coming from. Hugh Nibley said, it is common, says Buckhart, for mothers and sons to stick together in their frequent squabbles with the father, in which the son is often expelled from the paternal tent for vindicating his mother's cause. Just so Sariah takes the part of her sons in chiding her own husband, making the same complaints against him that they did, and she rates him roundly when she thinks he has been the cause of their undoing. So you have to understand some of the culture of this, okay? When a woman in this Old Testament period was not seen as equal with men. As a person, women were property of men. And so a woman was a property of her father until a man paid her father for her hand in marriage. The part of that was a dowry that she would keep as well. So if her husband dumps her, she still has this money to kind of help her out. But here's the thing is now a woman becomes the property of her husband. If her husband dies, she does not inherit his wealth. The family inherits his wealth, and she becomes a servant to the family, basically, or gets kicked out on the street, or has to go back to her dad to live in her dad's household, but can't inherit it. So she gets nothing. She's in a bad spot. And this is just the legal and cultural situation that women in the Old Testament find themselves in. So the best thing for a woman to do is to get married and give birth to a son. Because if the father dies, the son inherits the wealth, and the mother and son co-rule the family together. So a son legitimizes a woman. When she gives birth to a son, her existence is more legitimized. She now has someone that ties her directly to the wealth of the family and gives her a chance of having access and control over her future. Sons are vitally important in this kind of environment that women were in the Old Testament. And so to lose all of her sons means loss of her status, loss of her connections, her abilities to do things. And now her and her husband are out in the wilderness by themselves, and they're not getting any younger. So that's part of it. Hopefully you can start to see why this was a big deal for Sarah. This is some of the logic that women had to address and deal with in this time. So this isn't, I wouldn't say this is her claiming Lehi as a false prophet. This is her realizing that her own life, her value, her status, her opportunity is completely compromised if her sons are dead. And she's mad about this. Verse 4, and it had come to pass that my father spake unto her, saying, I know that I am a visionary man. So he's conceding that point. For if I had not seen the things of God in a vision, I should not have known the goodness of God. but had tarried at Jerusalem and had perished with my brethren. So he's saying, I understand I am a visionary man. I get that I've got dreams that defy logic and sound so weird and strange. I'm not arguing that point with you. He's conceding that point to her, in fact. But he says it's because of that vision that we're not going to die at Jerusalem with everybody else. The vision is saving us. So that's his rebuttal there. He says, verse 5, but behold, I have obtained a land of promise, in the which things I do rejoice. Yea, and I know that the Lord will deliver my sons out of the hands of Laban, and will bring them down again unto us in the wilderness. So he is now saying, I know God's going to take care of them. It's all going to work out. We have a land of promise. We have a land of inheritance that is greater than the inheritance we're giving up at Jerusalem. It is a prepared land that God has for choice people, and he wants us to go. This is going to be a better situation than where we were at in Jerusalem. So he says in verse 6, and after this manner of language did my father Lehi comfort my mother Sariah concerning us while we journeyed in the wilderness up to the land of Jerusalem to obtain the record of the Jews. So he's like, this is what happened while the last couple of chapters were happening. This is what was going on back in Lehi's camp. Hugh Nibley made a comment here in his book, An Approach to the Book of Mormon. He said, we have the Bible to guide us here. For the Book of Mormon opens in Bible country, and in the Bible, wilderness almost always means desert. Thus, when Lehi assures his wife that the Lord will bring their sons down again unto us in the wilderness, even while the young men journeyed in the wilderness up to the land of Jerusalem, we know beyond a doubt that the wilderness in question was the country between Jerusalem and the Red Sea, all of which is very dry and desolate. When in Arabia, Lehi's people had to be keeping in the most fertile parts of the wilderness in order to survive, it is clear what sort of country they were in. So that's this idea of the wilderness. Remember, when we think of being lost in the wilderness, we're thinking of like forests and mountains and fields and trees and things like that. This is the Middle East. Wilderness is desert. There's like almost nothing out there, basically. There's no shade, small vegetation. There's not much. So it's a harsh environment. You've got to realize when they talk about wilderness, that's what they're talking about at this point here. So verse 7, and when we had returned to the tent of my father, behold, their joy was full, and my mother was comforted. Now she knows, oh, good. My boys are back. Verse 8, and she spake, saying, now I know of a surety that the Lord hath commanded my husband to flee into the wilderness. Yea, and I also know of a surety that the Lord hath protected my sons, and delivered them out of the hands of Laban, and given them power whereby they could accomplish the thing which the Lord hath commanded them. And after this manner of language did she speak. So her test of faith was allowing her opportunities and everything that was valuable and important to her life to be 100% compromised, basically, to follow the commands of God. And then when they came back, that was the confirmation that her faith was put into God properly. That was her faith crisis. Nephi had his own faith crisis last chapter and was confirmed when everything worked out that it was done properly as well. So that builds the faith crisis, challenges our current beliefs to help us grow our faith if we put our faith in God more. If we try to put our faith in our own logic and our own ideas, it doesn't work. And so Sarai had the same problem Nephi did, just a different experience around it, but it helped to push her faith. That's why we have experiences in our life, and that's why faith crisis is not something to be shunned. Faith crisis is something that should actually happen to us every once in a while. If you haven't had a faith crisis in a while, you're not pushing your faith in God to a point of growing your faith. You've reached a level and you've plateaued your faith. If you're not growing, if you're not testing and trying to do better, which will result in a faith crisis, a challenge to your faith, then you're not learning and improving. You need to keep learning and improving. That's important to do all the time. Doesn't mean you have to be in constant faith crisis, but realize that we should normalize this concept of having our faith challenged. Learning something that contradicts what we currently believe is not a bad thing. It forces us to understand and examine, do we really believe this? Is this really true? Or is it not 100% true and I need to think deeper about it? That's how we improve our faith and keep growing. Conversion is a process, not an event. We need to keep going. Verse 9, and it came to pass that they did rejoice exceedingly and did offer sacrifice and burnt offerings unto the Lord, and they gave thanks unto the God of Israel. Kent Brown, in some of his writings, mentioned that one of the reasons to offer sacrifices might have also been to prevent the blood of Laban from cursing the family. Maybe that's an interesting point that he brought up once, is that maybe the sacrifices were to go, we killed somebody, don't hold us accountable for it because we don't want his blood on our hands and things because you told us to do it, God. So he thought maybe that's another reason, not just to give thanks, but to go, yeah, let's make sure we don't have any bad juju from that. Verse 10, and after they had given thanks unto the God of Israel, my father Lehi took the records which were engraven upon the plates of brass, and he did search them from the beginning. So he's reading these, he's learning from them, he's trying to understand them, basically. In fact, Hugh Nibley makes some comments here. He says, the value of the brass plates to the Nephites cannot be overestimated. By means of them, they are able to preserve the language, most of the civilization, and the religious knowledge of the people from whence they came. By way of contrast, the Mulekites, which is a group we're going to read about here in the book of Mosiah, several books later, who were led out of Jerusalem some 11 years after Lehi's departure and who had no record equivalent to the brass plates, soon dwindled in apostasy and unbelief and lost their language, civilization, and religion. We see that in the book of Omni. We'll learn a little bit more about that just before Mosiah. So from prophet to prophet and generation to generation, the brass plates were handed down and preserved by the Nephites. At some future date, the Lord has promised to bring them forth undimmed by time and retaining their original brightness, and the scriptural accounts recorded on them are to go forth unto every nation, kindred, tongue, and people. That's Bruce R. McConkie talks about that in his book Mormon Doctrine. So what the plates of brass are called is the Tanakh. Ta, Torah, books of Moses. Na, the prophets and writings. Ka, the history and literature, the Psalms. So that it's called the Tanakh. Basically, that's why it's the Torah, the prophets, and the Psalms. Basically, pretty cool to think about. So many good things here to think about the importance of these brass plates. They now have them, and it will help their civilization. We're going to see this play out for the rest of the Book of Mormon, that the importance of having these plates with them. Verse 11, so this is Lehi reading them, and we beheld they did contain the 5 books of Moses, which gave an account of the creation of the world, and also of Adam and Eve, who were our first parents, and also a record of the Jews from the beginning, even down to the commencement of the reign of King Zedekiah, king of Judah. So this is getting all up through like into the book of Jeremiah in the Old Testament time frame. So the 5 books of Moses, Judges, Chronicles, Kings, all those up there, Psalms, Isaiah, Amos, and some of those other ones as well, that all come up to about the time that Jeremiah is around. Verse 13, and also the prophecies of the holy prophets from the beginning even down to the commencement of the reign of Zedekiah, and also many prophecies which have been spoken by the mouth of Jeremiah. So this is during Jeremiah's time as the prophet. So we even have some of the writings of Jeremiah. They've documented it, of what he has said. And that's on these plates. So he's had some time in speaking. Jeremiah's not just suddenly a new person on the block. He's been around long enough that they've recorded his writings. Not everything that he said, but some of them. Verse 14, and it came to pass that my father Lehi also found upon the plates of brass a genealogy of his fathers, wherefore he knew that he was a descendant of Joseph. Yea, even that Joseph, who was the son of Jacob, who was sold into Egypt, and who was preserved by the hand of the Lord, that he might preserve his father Jacob and all his household from perishing with famine. Remember the story of Joseph in Egypt and all that? Lehi found out he's from Joseph. That's his tribe of Israel, is the tribe of Joseph. Now Joseph had 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. And so that's the other question, is which of the two sons of Joseph does he come from? Verse 15, and they were also led out of captivity and out of the land of Egypt by that same God who had preserved them. That's the story of Moses. And thus my father Lehi did discover the genealogy of his fathers. And Laban also was a descendant of Joseph, therefore he and his fathers had kept the records. And now when my father saw all these things, he was filled with the Spirit and began to prophesy concerning his seed. So he is so excited about what he's learning with these plates of brass and this great information and opportunities that he didn't get while in Jerusalem. He didn't realize some of these things, but now he's hearing more stories and more information that is helping him be so grateful to God that they have these. He's starting to feel the Spirit within himself of the truth of what's on the plates and those things to help him. And so he starts to prophesy. Verse 18, that these plates of brass should go forth unto all nations, kindreds, tongues, and people who were of his seed. Wherefore he said that these plates of brass should never perish, neither should they be dimmed any more by time, and he prophesied many things concerning his seed. So these are prophecies. The plates of brass will come forward. They'll be utilized. Now, we don't have the plates of brass literally at this point. We don't know where they're at, don't have them around anymore. But these are the plates of brass that Mormon and Moroni had when they compiled the Book of Mormon and utilized some of the information from it. Verse 20, and it came to pass that thus far I and my father had kept the commandments wherewith the Lord had commanded us. So they're following along. They're keeping the commandments. They're doing what God is asking them to do, basically. Verse 21, and we had obtained the records which the Lord had commanded us, and searched them and found that they were desirable, yea, even of great worth unto us, insomuch that we could preserve the commandments of the Lord unto our children. Wherefore it was wisdom in the Lord that we should carry them with us as we journeyed in the wilderness towards the land of promise. So now they're starting to see these really are valuable. This was worth the challenge and the toil and the problems that we went through to get them. Their faith is being confirmed that they're doing what God has asked them to do. They're filling the Spirit. They're moving in a direction that is helping them to follow God. And now that's building their faith, helping them to have more faith that'll guide them in the rest of their life. So this is where we're at now in this story. It's a really cool story. Some people look at the prophecies that Lehi has in here and say, well, does this mean, is he literally saying that the brass plates themselves will one day be revealed and we'll be able to read them and see them and ancient people can see them and do with them? Maybe. That is a possibility. Maybe that will come forward at some point. All we know about these is when Mormon and Moroni, who are at the end of the Book of Mormon that compiled all this together, there was a cave that had all these writings in it. They had lots of different plates and stacks and parchments and things in there. They had all these things there, and this is the place where Mormon compiled it all together. It's we don't know quite where. There's speculation. They call it the hill Cumorah, so they kind of think maybe they think maybe it's in the hill in New York, this depository of records that will come forth at some point, or possibly will. We don't know. We could look at this and say, technically we don't have the plates of brass, but we have the writings from them because they were written about on the gold plates that was used to make the Book of Mormon from. And so we do have the brass plates, in essence, with us, the information from some of the information off the brass plates with us because it's in the Book of Mormon. So there's two ways you could look at that and say, well, in some ways, the Book of Mormon coming forward does validate that and prove it. But it doesn't necessarily mean that these plates, the actual brass plates and all those ancient records, won't be found and discovered and utilized at some point. Now, there is a big controversy of, is this hill Cumorah the same one that Joseph had found the plates on and things that are, the hill Ramah and things like that. There's a whole book that Chris Heimerdinger, a fictional book that he puts together that goes over this debate of where is this hill of sacred records? Is it in New York or is it down in South America? And in his book, he argues it's in South America in the fictional book that he wrote. I think that was the Gadiantons and the Silver Sword book, if I remember right, was the one that he did on that one. So this is just interesting that there are these ideas, and it could be that we don't know where that repository is necessarily. I think there's some ideas that Joseph claims he may have seen in vision that it is in New York area somewhere. It's in the United States along the eastern area somewhere, but we don't know for sure. And there hasn't been much said about it since Joseph's time. So we don't know. Is it possible that that can all come forward? Possibly. Maybe that's during the millennium we get all that information. I don't know. That's not so much the important point, but it is an interesting point to look at. So let's jump to the next chapter, and we'll see you over there.